Now available in paperback and e-readers. John Haynes, 1987. Learn lessons about life and teenage love in the 1980s in this coming-of-age John Haynes story. Get your copy of John Haynes, 1987 in paperback and e-readers at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Is the collectibles market about to crash? That's the critical question I'm asking because I haven't seen the collectibles market this soft since 1989. Now, I have been a toy collector for over 35 years, and when I look at the 2023 collectibles market, it's one of the softest markets I have ever seen since 1989. Now, I got into collecting way back in 1987 when my mother bought me my first Voltron Deluxe, the lions that you see in the background of many of my videos, when she got it on clearance at Alexander's for $14.99. And in the subsequent years, I have built a large collection with the encouragement of my brother after he bought me the Vehicle Team and Gladiator Voltrons in 1988 and encouraged me to go into toy collecting in 1989. And I remember going on many hauls with my brother when we would go to places like Lionel Kitty City and Toys R Us and many local stores on Fordham Road looking for collectibles, and we would get a lot of collectibles for bargain prices. And I remember him picking up all the Silverhawks for $2.98 a piece, him picking up many Thundercats for $2.98, picking up many Thundercat vehicles like the Mutant Fist Pounder for $14.99, picking up 2 Darkseid Destroyers from Superpowers for $14.99, and also going out here and picking up many Panache Place Voltron items for $9.99. I remember when many of these items were basically being pushed out on clearance, and him and I going out here and picking up many of these items for next to nothing. Now, the toy market back in 1989 was extremely soft for collectors, and it was soft for collectors because we were transitioning out of one decade into another. And as we transitioned out of one decade into another, many of the kids who played with these pop culture toys basically were looking to put all of those toys down as they entered into adulthood. And as they entered into adulthood, they were looking to move on with their lives. And as they were looking to move on with their lives, a new generation of kids were able to pick up toys and start enjoying them, like Batman the Animated Series and Gargoyles and many other 90s toys like Biker Mice from Mars and many other collectibles. They were getting their own pop culture, and that could be one of the reasons why the 2023 toy market is so soft today. Now, the toy market has really basically started to go into a state of decline after, I believe, peaking as related to the COVID-19 pandemic. And after the COVID-19 pandemic, we had a lot of people basically no longer interested in collecting anymore like they used to back 20 years ago. Now, 20 years ago, we had a red hot collectibles market, and that market was very hot because there were a lot of items that people wanted and a lot of lines that were emerging that were becoming very popular, like Marvel Legends, Transformers Masterpiece, and Soul of Chogokin. People basically there were a lot of great updated toys that reminded people of their childhood. And we had a lot of other companies coming out here with some truly great figures from imports like SH Figure Arts. We had NECA coming out with some fantastic stuff. But it's looking to me like the market has become extremely soft, and I believe that the market is extremely soft for several reasons. Now, the first reason I believe that the market is extremely soft these days has to do with oversaturation. I mean, these days there are more figures out here than there were over 35 years ago, and these days we have some characters who have multiples of figures. I mean, Batman has over, I believe, 500 figures out there in multiple scales, And when it comes to many other characters in their own toy lines like Marvel Legends, I mean, we've gone through about 8 Captain Americas, 50 Spider-Mans, about 100 Iron Mans, and about 12 or 13 Thors. And this is just basically in all throughout these lines. And because there are so many different versions of characters, people have so much choice that it just becomes overwhelming for the customer. And what exacerbates that situation as related to there being a saturation of figures is the fact that we have companies like Hasbro basically going out here and continuing to announce more figures. And with there being such a large supply of figures and new figures announced every week, it has become overwhelming for most collectors out here to collect them all. And I believe that's one of the reasons why so many people just aren't going out here and are eager to put in a pre-order for a figure these days, because with Hasbro going out here and announcing the multiples of characters and announcing multiple figures every week, people are just overwhelmed by all of the choices and just cannot collect them all anymore. Now, this runs counter to what we used to have back in the days of Toy Biz, where when they were making Marvel Legends and Mattel was making DC Universe Classics, we only got 3 waves of figures a year, and we got some Comic-Con exclusives twice a year with SDCC exclusives and NYCC exclusives. That was what we got in the mid-2000s, and that was enough that people could go out here and collect everything. But these days, it's just overwhelming because we get multiple waves of Marvel Legends, we get multiple waves of McFarlane DC, we get multiple waves of Masters of the Universe, we get multiple waves of G.I. Joe Classified, and we also have independent figures from lines like Loose Collector Collectibles, and something has to give. And it looks to me like a lot of people are just giving up on toy collecting because it's just overwhelming at this point. And it's overwhelming, and it's just too many characters coming out too fast for a lot of people. And that's what's leading to some people looking to throw up their hands and walk away from collecting altogether. Now, the other thing that I believe has a lot of people discouraged from collecting are the price hikes over at Hasbro. Hasbro has decided that action figures, which originally only cost $19.99 from about 2015 to about 2020, they have driven up the price for many of their figures of their various lines, such as Marvel Legends, G.I. Joe Classified, Indiana Jones, and the Power Rangers Lightning Collection. The price is now $24.99 and even going up to $29.99 or $34.99 on certain figures. And that has made some collectors, I believe, balk as related to going out here and collecting anything as related to Hasbro, because with the price being so high, you really cannot go out here and have the incentive to go pick up an entire wave and complete an entire wave of figures, because back in the early mid-2000s, when they introduced the whole Build-A-Figure concept, you could go out here and build a Galactus for under $100, but these days it's costing close to $200 just to build a Build-A-Figure like Puff Adder. And it's just very, again, expensive to the point where a lot of collectors now are starting to balk because of the character choices, 1, and 2, the Build-A-Figures being pretty lame, and even some figures without Build-A-Figure pieces in lines like Spider-Man and the new X-Men 97 animated line aren't even coming with Build-A-Figure pieces, but the price is still $24.99, and I believe that that price might be possibly way too high for most collectors to go out here and afford, looking to continue building their collections. Now, the other thing that has done damage to the market is as I believe it, a saturation of Star Wars and MCU product. And that basically ties into what I talked about as related to people transitioning from one decade to the next and pop culture basically shifting. Now, back in the mid-2000s through the 2010s, MCU action figures were extremely popular because the MCU was extremely popular, but it looks like with the MCU becoming less popular and less people being interested in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, what's happening is we're starting to see a lot of MCU figures starting to rot on store shelves and a lot of MCU figures winding up on clearance. Now, these MCU figures have started to wind up on clearance because what has happened is people have lost interest in the MCU since Endgame, and since they've lost interest in the MCU since Endgame, what they aren't interested in is continuing to collect the characters of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and this is where we're seeing a lot of merchandise from movies like The Eternals, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, Thor, Love and Thunder, and even many MCU show figures basically winding up going on clearance at places like Target and Walmart, and then also winding up in places like Ollie's on clearance. This is something that YouTubers like World Class Bullshitters have presented in their videos, and it's something that I've seen as related to the MCU. Now, with Star Wars, I believe it never really took off with the sequel trilogy, and because the Star Wars sequel trilogy basically failed, we saw that being one of the things that led to the collapse of Toys R Us here in the United States. And I believe that the Star Wars glut has basically wound up, again, making it where there's a lot of product basically out there. And with there being a large supply of product, there has not been that demand for it. So I'm seeing a lot of Star Wars stuff basically rotting on store shelves. And I'm seeing a lot of Star Wars merchandise rotting on store shelves because kids of today and collectors of today just aren't interested in 21st century Star Wars. And this reminds me again a lot of what I saw 35 years ago, back when me and my brother would go to places like Kitty City and also go to many Korean retailers who had a lot of old store stock, and we would go out here and pick up those items for next to nothing. And when we would go out here and pick up those items for next to nothing, we thought, oh, they were going to go up in value, but I'm not seeing that type of market like I did back then. No, what I see with the market is that things are on a major state of decline, and they're on a major state of decline. And one of the reasons I believe it's on a major state of decline is because the toy market is basically saturated at this point, and it's so saturated with so much product that people can just go out here and buy whatever they want. I mean, we live in an age where if you are collecting 6-inch scale, there's basically about as I see it, about 6 or 7 Captain Americas just from Hasbro alone, and there are 3 or 4 Captain Americas from Toy Biz if you're buying comic version Captain America, and if you want to go 5-inch, there's about 3 or 4 versions, and if you want to go MCU, there's about 4 or 5 versions of Captain America. And when it comes to Spider-Man, there's I believe about 50 versions of Spider-Man you can go out here and buy, not to mention the hundreds of Iron Mans from the movie and the multiple versions of the character from the comics. So there are so many versions of characters out there that people just have their choice about what they can choose, and that has basically deflated the prices on many characters because there's so much supply that the demand for those characters has gone down, and if you miss out on one version of a character, there will be another one down the road, and that has basically led to the collectibles market where everything is in a state of decline. And that was further exacerbated by things like related to the DC universe when they decided to go from its classic universe to the new 52. When DC decided to go from the classic universe to the new 52, what has happened is many of the old figures like DC Universe Classics, the bottom has dropped out on all of them. And what has happened is we're starting to see figures like variants like this Artemis basically going for less than nothing when these figures were going for $40 or $50 about 4 or 5 years ago. And with the DC Universe in a state of just dysfunction, a lot of people don't have the incentive to collect DC figures anymore. So what has happened is a lot of lines like the DC Universe Classics line have basically seen their prices drop, where I've basically been able to get figures like Series 1 Batman for $14.99 on eBay, and I've also been able to get Green Arrow for $15. Again, these were figures that were considered high-priced figures at one time, and these figures are going for nothing because McFarlane is making the same characters over again, and as McFarlane makes the same characters, DC Universe Classics have gone out of vogue with collectors, and those figures are now going for rock-bottom prices. So that's another indicator to the figure market being in a major slump, because I'm starting to see a lot of collectibles again from the last decade going for next to nothing as people jump on the McFarlane bandwagon over at as related to the DC license. And I'm also starting to see again a lot of collectors going out here and just again becoming fatigued, because again a lot of people have been collecting for a long time like I have, and some people are content with what they've got right now, and because they've got all the characters they want, they don't need to buy anymore. And others are basically throwing in the towel because it's just becoming too expensive, and others are throwing in the towel because it's just too many figures coming out too soon. I mean, with Hasbro these days, they basically announce a new figure every week, and that's really overwhelming, especially when you compare it to back about 2006, because in about 2006, people were out here, we only had 3 waves of Marvel Legends, sometimes we only had 2, and we basically look forward to them. And because there was a bit of balance, because we only had 3 waves of Marvel Legends or 3 waves of DC Universe Classics in a year, that made it a little easier on collectors who could go out here and budget for those figures. But it's hard to budget when Hasbro bombards you with figures every week. And that's where people are asking Hasbro, again, to chill out and pull it back a bit, because you're making too much stuff and people just can't collect it all. So the toy market these days has gotten real soft, and it's gotten real soft because a lot of people are coming out of the pandemic and going back to work. They don't have that disposable income anymore. And we also have just a lot of product out on the market in places like Ollie's on clearance. I mean, I recently saw the entire collector wave over at the Ollie's in World Class Bullshitters videos for $9.99, and I'm also seeing a lot of MCU product. And again, when I look at the toy market, it's looking as soft as it did back in 1989 when I started to get serious about the hobby. I haven't seen it this soft in over 35 years, and I haven't seen the toy collectibles market this bad in over 35 years. I mean, this is the worst toy market I've seen in a while, and I see the indicators again that a lot of toy companies are pumping out too much product, and the whole thing is they're making more supply that can be demanded, and that is a thing that is leading to the softness in the toy market and the collectibles market. I mean, back in the day, they used to go out here and make enough figures, but it looks like they're making too many. And because they're making too many, we're starting to see a lot of collectibles going into the landfill, similar to the way Atari cartridges wound up in landfills back in the 80s during the video game crash of '83. Funko Pops are basically being dumped in a landfill because they made too many, and I believe right now they possibly have made too many superhero figures because the superhero movie trend is about to end. And with everything starting to go into this state of decline, I have to wonder, is it a problem for the toy companies, or is it an opportunity for collectors to pick up items at bargain basement prices the way my brother and I did back in the late 80s? I have to wonder, is it a problem that is becoming an opportunity in the future? But I look at the toy market now, and again, it's a sad state of affairs, and it's further exacerbated by the state of eBay. I mean, eBay these days charges so many fees to the point where anybody looking to sell collectibles cannot really make any money on it anymore. And that's another reason why the market has really gone soft. I mean, a lot of times people would look to go out here and resell items later on in the secondary market, but there's no way you can do this with eBay these days because they charge all of these high fees, and these high fees basically take a good chunk of whatever you make. And because it takes a chunk of whatever you make, it doesn't give you incentive to go out here and look to put up anything for sale like I had to do when I was looking to go out here and be able to pay for my Isis Wrath of the Cyber Goddess cover. I mean, I don't see the market being as strong as it was as related to eBay. And again, showing me softness in the market because people are getting stuck with collectibles. And if they wanted to sell them, they would have to sell them at a loss. That is further was put in, exacerbated by the American Rescue, which I call the American Screwjob plan, where people have to report all of this income on their taxes. And all of this has basically led to an extremely soft collectibles market that I hope doesn't turn into a collectibles market crash of 2024. Now, if you want to pick up some of my books on the SJS Direct imprint, like the Isis series, the Esteem series, the John Haynes series, and the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, you can find all those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them at other online booksellers like Smashwords, the iBookstore, and Google Play. And if you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can send a donation to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, Godbreaker. The man who rules the world takes on the Asgardian god of thunder in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get your copy of John Haynes, Godbreaker in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.